There's a certain kind of silence that settles over the Texas brush country just before dawn. It is the hour when the heat has not yet returned, when the cicadas have gone quiet, and when the only movement on a thermal trail camera is usually a raccoon or a startled deer. But on a ranch in the hill country, a routine eradication camera set up to track feral hog movement recorded something that made the biologists reviewing the footage stop, rewind, and watch it again in silence. It was not a hog doing what hogs do. It was something moving around the hogs. Something patient, deliberate, and far too coordinated to be an accident of nature. And once wildlife officials understood what they were looking at, it forced them to reconsider almost everything they thought they knew about how to fight the worst invasive species crisis in American history. To understand why this footage mattered so much, you have to understand exactly how far out of control the situation already was. Feral hogs are not native to North America. They arrived with European colonization, brought over as a portable, self-sustaining food source that could be released into the wild and hunted later. That plan worked exactly as intended for a few generations, and then it stopped working entirely because pigs are far too intelligent, far too adaptable, and far too fertile to stay contained by anyone's plans. Domestic pigs that escaped or were deliberately released bred in the wild for centuries with no natural predator large enough to check their numbers. Later, in the early 20th century, Eurasian wild boar were imported for sport hunting on private game lands. Boar escape enclosures constantly, and when they did, they crossed with the feral domestic pigs already established across the South. The resulting hybrid combined the boar's aggression, thick hide, and survival instinct with the domestic pig's fast reproductive cycle. What emerged was an animal built to outcompete nearly everything else on the landscape. The reproductive math alone explains why this problem has never been solved by force. A single sow can produce 2 litters a year, with as many as a dozen piglets per litter. Under good conditions, a feral hog population can double in well under half a year. Wildlife agencies now estimate the national feral hog population at somewhere in the range of 6 to 9 million animals, spread across at least 35 states. Texas alone is thought to carry more than 2.5 million hogs, present in nearly every county in the state. These are not small, timid animals either. Adult hogs can run at speeds that outpace a human sprinter, clear low fences without breaking stride, and carry tusks capable of serious injury. Their hide is thick and layered with cartilage-like tissue that can turn a poorly placed round into a wasted shot. Wildlife biologists who study hog behavior describe them as fast learners. An animal that survives one close call with a trap or a hunting party will avoid that same set of conditions for a very long time, and will teach that avoidance to its offspring. The economic toll is staggering. Agricultural economists at Texas universities have estimated hog damage in the state alone at several $100 million a year, from destroyed crops, torn up pasture land, ruined irrigation systems, and damaged fencing. Nationally, estimates for the total cost of feral hog damage run into the billions annually. This is before accounting for the public safety incidents. Hogs rushing runways at rural airfields, tearing through residential yards, and in rare but documented cases, attacking people who surprise a sow with piglets nearby. For decades, the standard response followed the same basic script everywhere. Trap what you can, shoot what you can't trap, and hope the population thins out before it does more damage. Ranchers set cage traps baited with corn. Hunting outfits ran dogs. In the last 20 years, aerial gunning from helicopters became the go-to method for covering large tracts of land quickly, sometimes removing more hogs from a single ranch in an afternoon than a ground crew could manage in a month. None of it worked in any lasting way. A helicopter crew could clear a pasture on a Tuesday, and by the following season, hogs from neighboring, unmanaged land would move in to fill the vacuum. Worse, wildlife researchers began noticing an uncomfortable pattern. Aggressive removal pressure did not just reduce hog numbers in one place, it scattered survivors into new territory. Hogs pushed off one property by helicopter gunfire or persistent trapping would relocate, sometimes into counties that had previously been hog-free, and establish entirely new breeding populations there. Every successful removal operation on one ranch risked planting the seeds of a new infestation somewhere else. The costs kept climbing while results stayed temporary. A single coordinated helicopter operation over a large property could run into the tens of thousands of dollars before a single animal was removed. Federal and state wildlife agencies have collectively spent well over $100 million on hog control efforts nationwide over the past decade. Conferences were held, papers were published, and the population kept climbing anyway, because the entire strategy was built around removing adult animals from a population that could replace its adult numbers faster than any agency could remove them. Meant to it. Field observations in several high hog density areas have found that coyote predation on piglets tends to cluster in the early morning hours, right after it was, as more than one frustrated wildlife manager put it privately, a war fought entirely on the enemy's terms. The infrared footage that changed the conversation did not show hogs at all, at least not directly. It showed a small group of coyotes moving through the brush in the hour before sunrise, low to the ground, spaced evenly apart, moving with an unmistakable sense of purpose rather than the scattered, opportunistic wandering typical of scavenging behavior. What the biologists watched unfold over the following minutes looked less like random predation and more like a rehearsed maneuver. One coyote approached a nesting area from downwind, staying low enough that its silhouette barely broke the grass line, keeping the mother sow from catching its scent. Two others moved into position on either flank, out of the sow's direct line of sight. When the sow briefly left the nest to forage, the group moved. A short burst of motion, a single precise bite, and a piglet was gone into the tree line in a matter of seconds, long before the mother could complete her turn and respond. This was not an isolated clip. As wildlife agencies began pulling footage from cameras across multiple counties, and later from sites in other states with heavy hog populations, they found the same pattern repeating. Coyotes were not simply scavenging hog carcasses left behind by hunters, as had long been assumed. They were actively hunting piglets, using coordinated group tactics that closely resemble the cooperative hunting behavior more commonly associated with wolves. Necropsies performed on coyotes removed from high hog density areas backed up what the cameras were showing. A significant portion of the animals examined were found to have fresh piglet tissue in their stomachs, not scavenged carrion, but recently killed prey. Scat sample analysis in several states with heavy feral hog populations turned up similar results, with piglet DNA appearing far more often than wildlife biologists had expected. This mattered enormously, because it meant coyotes had found the one point of vulnerability in the feral hog's otherwise nearly bulletproof reproductive strategy, the piglets themselves, in the earliest and most defenseless weeks of life. Coyotes are, on paper, badly outmatched by an adult feral hog. A grown sow can outweigh a coyote by a factor of 6 or more, and a cornered adult hog is fully capable of injuring or killing a coyote that gets too close. Coyotes seem to understand this trade-off instinctively, because the footage shows them almost never engaging adult hogs directly. Instead, they manufacture confusion. A single coyote will make a fast, visible pass near a nesting site, just close enough to trigger a defensive reaction from the mother sow, but far enough away to avoid being caught. The piglets scatter in response to the disturbance, and the mother's attention is split between multiple directions at once. While she is reorienting, the flanking coyotes make their move on a piglet that has been separated from the group, delivering a single fast bite and retreating into cover before the mother can respond. The entire sequence, from the first distraction to the retreat, often takes only a few seconds. Researchers who have studied the behavior describe it as a form of high-risk, high-reward micropredation. Coyotes are not trying to overpower the group. They are exploiting the brief window of chaos and misdirected attention that a mother sow cannot fully control. It is the kind of tactical division of labor, distraction, flanking, and retreat that most people would associate with wolves working a much larger animal, not with an animal frequently dismissed as an opportunistic scavenger. There is also a timing. Elia mother sow has spent the night foraging and is at her most physically fatigued. It is precisely the window when her reaction time and vigilance are at their lowest, and the coyotes appear to have adapted their hunting schedule to exploit it. Wildlife ecologists have a plausible explanation for how this behavior emerged. Coyote populations across much of the South and Southeast lost access to a lot of their traditional small prey base, rabbits, rodents, and other small mammals, as habitat changed and human development expanded. At the same time, an enormous, largely undefended food source, feral hog piglets, was multiplying practically unchecked across the same landscape. Coyotes, being highly adaptable generalist predators, appear to have shifted their behavior to exploit that surplus, developing increasingly coordinated group tactics as the strategy proved successful over successive generations. The population data coming out of areas with strong, undisturbed coyote presence is difficult to argue with. In parts of the Southeast, researchers monitoring feral hog reproduction have found that coyote predation accounts for a meaningful share of piglet mortality in some seasons, in some areas high enough